Hello, people. You're welcome to ProUp Masterclass. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and today's class is going to be like a follow up to a question I answered earlier. And for those who have not listened to that podcast, you might want to listen to it. And it's a podcast that I titled Finding That Work That Truly Makes You Happy. Finding that work that truly makes you happy. And I was answering a question where someone was asking what career to go for. She was turning between two career paths. And I was talking about why people work. And I said people work for survival, people work for sustenance, people work to show, and people work for status. And I said the last reason why people work is as a service to God. And in that podcast, I kind of recommended that if you truly want to be happy, do your work as a service to God. And if you're going to do your work as a service to God, you must be clear what God is telling you to do and who God is telling you to serve. And after I did that podcast, one of my mentees reached out to me, Dami, and he always listens to my podcast, and one of the first people to listen to it, and he always asks questions. So I enjoy talking to him. I enjoy talking to a lot of my mentees because they kind of ask questions that make me think further about some of my thoughts. And so Dami asked the question. It wasn't like a question, but it was a concern. He said, okay, so service is you knowing what God wants you to do and doing what he tells you to do, but how do you hear God? You understand? How do I hear God? And he said, how do I know when God is speaking as opposed to when my mind is telling me something? So how do I know it's not just my mind telling me stuff? How do I hear God? You understand? And that's a good question. And, it really made me understand, something about, there's a thing I read about expertise. It says sometimes when you work with the expert forgets that you are not an expert. So when you have an expert teaching you, that's the problem when you have professors, people that are academics that are teaching you. They kind of forget that you haven't gone through that long academic line with them too, and so it's very easy for them to kind of forget critical elemental things and explain things to the detail. And so when Dami asked that question, it kind of brought me to, okay, you can't always talk about hearing from God and say, oh, God, let God lead you, because some people just don't know how. You understand? They can't tell God's voice from any other voice. And that's where, for me, it's like, okay, I need to go back and think about the guy who might not even have a relationship with God. You understand? That is so abstract to him. Hear from God is like you talking in gibberish. So I'm going to try to bring it home here and try to kind of explain what it is like to hear from God, because it sounds so spiritual. It is a spiritual experience to hear from God, but then it is not as highfalutin, as fancy as people think it is. It should be one of the most natural things because God is your creator. And you know how the problem with man has always been this our brain that tries to complicate a lot of things. But by doing that, it solves problems. So the problem with man has always been the fact that we think. It's our biggest strength, our biggest hindrance. So when you can think as a man, as a human, that is it my mind talking to me or is it God? That is something animals don't have to deal with. Animals are very instinctive, and what instinct means is a direct line to God. You're not questioning it. You do it because there is a spiritual link telling you to do it. You understand? So a dog doesn't think, why do I bark? It just knows it ought to bark. A fish doesn't think, how am I swimming? It just knows I am swimming. It's instinctive. But human beings, the older we grow, the less instinctive we are, the more questioning. And because of that, we get wiser. But because of that also, we question a lot and we kind of get more doubtful. And that's why we kind of say, okay, this listening to God must be a very hard thing because I don't see him. You understand? Then we begin to question that. So I'm going to try to explain what for me hearing from God feels like, what it is to me. And I'm also trying to I'm also going to try to go to this place where I would say why a lot of people find it hard to hear from God and experience this thing called hearing from God. So, what do I mean when I talk about, oh, um I heard from God? You understand? Um, what does it mean? Without trying to sound like a spiritual nut. What do people mean? I can't talk about what people mean. I can talk about what I mean. Um, and I would say, for me, my experience of being led by God, a leading, and I think the some of it might be the languaging we use about hearing from God, because when we say hearing, we are always so focused on our ears and what is audible. You understand? So we are focused on sound. And that's the first mistake we kind of make, where we kind of restrict a hearing from God to an actual hearing, which it could be. But a lot of times, for me as a person, it actually isn't a hearing. It's more of a leading. You understand? It's more of a leading. It's more of an internal feeling I have. It's more, for me, it's more of a nagging thought. And so I would give this instance. Um, you see, I talked about how God led me to be a teacher and a mentor and a speaker, um, and really draw away from design. It was never really audible per se, not audible. But then what happened was, when I started working as a designer, doing logos, I did that for almost 20 years, you understand? And as I was doing that, I was having a lot of younger designers approach me, telling me how much my work was inspiring them and how much they were learning from me. And it got to a place where they started asking me um, questions about their work, about their relationship with clients, about their finances, about their career path decisions. And, you know, at a point, I wasn't really answering their questions because I was so focused on my business, which was working for my clients and delivering work for my clients. So I wasn't answering their questions. You understand? So they used to reach out to me on WhatsApp and stuff. And I remember then, this was like 2019. I think from 2018, when people started really watching my YouTube channel, people now started contacting me to talk to their WhatsApp communities, and I used to show up to just talk to people about design and how to make your design better, how to serve your clients better, how to be more profitable as designers. And after the WhatsApp sessions, people will send me messages, and I'll leave these messages on my phone for long, for days, weeks, even months, because at that point I was too busy serving my clients and trying to build my business. Now, this is where the leading of God comes in and how I experienced it. And you might experience it in a different way, but for the person who is kind of experiencing the way I'm experiencing it, I just want to let you know that you might want to think of that as God leading you, because that's for me, God leading me. So I realized that every time I stayed away from these questions from designers, and I kept it off for too long, there was always this nagging thought in my mind. When I'm sleeping, it'd be nagging me. When I'm taking my bath, it's always there. Just answer this. It might just be one person that I've left hanging. Remember, there were never a barrage of messages, just a few, maybe one or two, and just be on my mind. Answer this person. Answer this person. Send this message to this person. Send this message, and I would resist it, because I don't have any time to spend sending a message to someone clarifying something I've already talked about. I'm like, I will get to it when I'm done with my work. But then the nagging feeling never went. So for me, a lot of times, God's leading was always a nagging feeling. It was annoyingly nagging. It was silent but loud. I was the only one hearing it, but then it was just there. Waking thought. Maybe the person's name was Olumide. We're like, Olumide, answer Olumide. Answer Olumide's question. Answer Olumide's question. And I'll be eating answer Olumide. And I just feel this burden on my mind about Olumide. I find myself thinking about Olumide more than I'm thinking about my work. And Olumide just becomes a major distraction to me doing my work. And because I'm thinking so much about answering Olumide's question, I'm unable to focus on my work. It's just there. It's not going. It's persistent. It's there. And then I now decide to answer Olumide. So I send Olumide a message on WhatsApp answering his question. And before I know it, it's like a knot has been loosened in my mind, and I'm able to work better for my clients again. I just feel a free flow of my thoughts. My sleep is sweeter, is smoother, and I just feel some freedom. And I think that's the best way I can explain it, the freedom. But now that I think about it, that freedom is actually a sense of happiness. The world just looks like for me, it looks more colorful. You understand? I feel more alive. And in my mind, I just feel, I'm ready for the next Olumide. You understand? It's just a sense of identity. I feel good about being alive. And that kept on happening, for over a year. That kept on happening. But I didn't identify it as God's leading. I just identified it as trying to get to what I had to do. But it always happened. It was always nagging. And at a point, I realized that nagging was now about committing more to talking to people. And I remember I had the same nagging before I started my YouTube channel. I always talk about how I started my YouTube channel was with me and my wife having a conversation about how to make extra income. And she told me about starting the YouTube channel and talking. This was in 2016 or 2017. And I remember I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to start recording content or putting my voice or my face out there. I'm an introvert. You understand? I'm very private person. I really don't like letting people into my space that much. You understand? I like having discussions, but not once we're done with the discussion, don't come to my house. You understand that kind of thing? Don't call me. You understand? I loved my space. So me putting myself out there, my house, my face was very uncomfortable, and I didn't want to do it. But then this nagging thing came up again, and it nagged me for a year, from 2017 to 2018. It nagged me. I couldn't focus on anything. I was unhappy. And I didn't really have any reason to be unhappy because my business was going well. I was healthy, my family was fine, but I was unhappy that I wasn't doing that thing that my mind was telling me I am not built to do. Because my mind was telling me, you're an introvert. You're not meant to be going out there talking to people, that kind of thing. You like your space. But then something within me was saying, you need to go there. So it was a tussle for a year, a big tussle for a year. And it took, a lot of, I just had to surrender, because then I realized I was unhappy. I was unhappy doing regular things that made me happy on a good day, like designing, getting good client work, good commissions, the thing that should have made me happy. I wasn't happy because I was suspending that thing that was coming from within me to do. And for me, that was the voice of God. You understand? The voice of God is a nagging feeling. It's a nagging leading that you cannot ignore. You cannot. Nobody else is hearing it, but you are hearing it. As a matter of fact, sometimes, at least in my case, he sends some people from time to time to just tell you, to remind you that it's not just in your head. You can also hear it from the outside. So before I started my YouTube channel, I remember I had a friend who one morning, just one of those mornings where I just felt, when God was telling me to start my YouTube channel through this nagging feeling and I wasn't doing it, I would sleep and I would wake up tired. You understand? I will sleep for hours, 7 hours, and I will wake up tired. You understand? That's one of the signs. You just can't have rest. Is that thing? There's no rest. God's leading is so powerful. God is such an incredible force that you rebel against your very essence by not flowing with that force. So for me, I was always tired. I would wake up and I would be tired. It wasn't like I wasn't getting enough sleep. And one of those days when I just woke up and I was just tired and just felt unfulfilled, I looked at my phone and I just saw a message from my friend who hadn't sent me a message in a while. And I discussed with him this discussion I had with my wife about starting this YouTube channel. And this was several months after we discussed. And this was around 5:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30. Just couldn't sleep. And I just woke up and just saw the message. And he was like, don't forget that YouTube channel thing you told me about some months ago. I think it's time to do it. That for me, that was just it's not just going on in my head. There are external forces leading me this way too. So, for me, God's leading is that nag. It's that nag. It doesn't go away. I know a lot of people have this mentality that when God is leading you, you don't answer. He will find somebody else. Well, I don't want to argue with that, but I feel God is more persistent than we give him credit for. For me, he's more persistent. He doesn't let me go. You understand? Doesn't let me go. So I felt that same leading in 2020 when I have felt a strange leading to stop doing design and focus more on answering the Olumi days in my life. You understand? People that had questions. And I felt the same. Stop working with these clients. You've done enough. You've earned enough. Stop it. Nagging feeling. Stop it. Commit more to making this content and recording content and talking about your thoughts and answering people's questions. Commit more to it. But then, there was this security I had in being a designer, because for me, that was my income. I was like, why would you have me stop this thing that has taken me 20 years to build, and I've gotten to this point where people don't even argue price with me anymore? Why would I stop now? Why would I stop now when food is ready? You understand? The only thing left is to put this spoon in my mouth and start gorging myself with this food. Why will I stop now? I remember when I started design and I had to hustle clients. Now I'm not hustling clients. People are calling me on a daily. I'm even having to turn back clients. Why would I stop now? Why? But then, God works in very funny ways. And for me, it was a resistance, and I resisted 2020 up to 2021. I remember through the whole COVID period, I was like, why am I stopping? You understand? I'm having business when people cannot go to work. Why would I put myself in a place where I'm now stopping? You understand? So COVID for me, I had a lot of clients at my door during COVID. I'm like, why would I stop now when people are praying for work and you're telling me to stop to do something that doesn't bring in money? But you see, that's why I believe God is persistent. He nagged and nagged and nagged, for lack of better words, for a better word, for me to stop doing this thing. And when I didn't listen, the clients started dropping. They just started disengaging. Telling me, so that we can't work with you anymore. It's too expensive to working with you. We can't work with you anymore. We're closing down our business. We can't work with you anymore. We've hired a new, younger designer that can stop, So clients just started dropping off till I lost all my clients. No matter how hard I pushed, nobody came calling. Nobody. Not even for free work. Not even for, Tola, can you do free work for me? Because at the point I would have done free work just to prove that I could still design. But the free work wasn't even coming. And that nagging feeling, stop doing this design, commit more to doing this content creation, mentoring, guiding, people, speaking. Commit more to doing it. For me, that was a big nag. And I remember, for me, remember I said there's always the internal voice of God. But then sometimes he speaks to some external people. I remember there was a time I was talking with my wife and just kind of advising her about her work. I remember my daughter, she was sitting in the parlor and we were sitting on the dining table after dinner just talking. And she was looking at me. I didn't even know she was looking at me, but after a while she just said, Daddy, I feel this is what you should be doing. I said, what? I feel you really should be talking to people. And this is my daughter, young. How old was she then? Maybe 8 or 9, you understand? But then she spoke to my soul and I knew it was not her talking to me. It was that nagging feeling that's been nagging me all that while, that was the voice of God. You understand? And that's how God leads you. You understand? God leads you through a nagging feeling. So when you hear from God, it's not always audible. It's how you feel on your inside. It's that, for me, it's that nagging feeling. For other people, it might be different. But I'm just trying to explain what I mean when I say I hear from God. You understand? It's not as abstract as we think. It's not a teleportation, levitating from your body type kind of thing. No, it isn't. For me, it feels natural. You understand? I kind of think it's how a dog feels when it feels it has to bark, or a cat feels it has to meow. You understand? It's just natural. It's just a leading, a push to do something. Just that the difference between me and a dog is that I'm more rational and I'm actually thinking, why am I doing this thing? Unlike the animal that just does it, more instinctive. So for me, that's the experience of being led or hearing from God. But then I want to go into why some people do not hear from God. You understand? Or don't feel led, or find it hard to decipher whether they are being led by God or not. And I think the first thing I'm going to say is a lot of people talk too much. You understand? A lot of people talk too much in this activity called prayer. And I feel this is a big reason why people do not hear from God. It's hard to know God's voice if you're not allowing Him to talk. You can't know God's voice if you're not allowing Him to talk. You can't know your friend's voice if you're always the one talking. If you're talkative. And that's what we do a lot during this thing called prayer. We just load God with our needs and our expectations of Him, and hardly take time to listen. And I believe there is a place of prayer where you talk, but I believe more of prayer is listening. And a lot of people just don't listen. You understand? They don't listen during prayer. So when they're praying for 5 minutes, say 5 minutes of them ranting. When they're praying for 10 minutes, say 10 minutes of monologue. You understand? And when they are done talking, they are done praying. You can never know God's voice that way. We need to spend more time listening. You understand? Prayer is more about listening. I think what God has to tell us is way more important than what we have to tell Him. And I guess, that's one of the hardest things about prayer, is that stillness, being passive. And a lot of human beings have a problem with passivity. We see it as a negative thing. But with God, passivity is not a negative thing, especially in the place of prayer. When you can take this position of passivity in prayer, your mind will be still, and then you will be able to 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 sense that feeling. And it's a complicated thing. It can sound like a pretty complicated thing, because it's remember, we are so used to hearing with our ears and not with our souls. So it sounds complicated, but it's a natural thing, it's an instinctive thing. But you need to be silent. You understand? If you're going to know God's voice, you need to be silent and listen out for Him. You understand? You need to. A lot of times, what we call our mind, especially when you build a relationship with God, a lot of what we call our mind is God talking to us. You understand? Our mind is what God has been talking to us from when we were very, very little. But the thing is that we came to a point where we became too intelligent. You understand? We became too intelligent for God, and we kind of feel we have a right to this real estate called our minds. But God owns it all. You understand? But we have a battle to claim some of it for ourselves. And I guess in the place of prayer, when you approach God in prayer, the first thing you're doing is saying, God, have the whole thing, the whole 9 yards. Call my mind. So I'm going to keep silent as you have everything, and just allow you put a brick or 2 bricks today. And I'm just going to just help me to be receptive to know when you put a brick on it. You understand? But then what we do when we pray is that we come to God with our bricks in our hands already, knowing what we want to lay down. So it's very hard to now know when God is talking to us. So a lot of us talk too much in prayer. And I believe if you are really serious about hearing God talking to you and knowing when He's leading you, you must keep quiet, and you must be able to um, take a more passive approach to relating with Him, especially in the place of prayer. More passive, not entirely passive, but more passive. You understand? And be more saying what He has to say is more important than what you have to say. What He needs from you is more important than what you need from Him. And you realize that by doing that more often, you get used to, oh, this is what it feels like hearing from God. This is our you begin to know what your own method of hearing from God is. You understand? Um, so people talk too much. Um, I think the second reason why people find it hard to hear from God is they have too many people feeding them. Too many people feeding them. Too many external voices. And so apart from us talking too much, a lot of us have too many external voices. Um, and that's the problem, especially in this information knowledge age where everybody has a mentor or two, you understand, and have an early morning regiment of, especially Christians, of preachers that they listen to. So before they start their day, they listen to 2 or 3 preachers. Before they go to bed, they listen to, while they are driving to work, they are listening. Too many voices. And it's not bad to have people that you listen to that clarify things for you, but I think you don't want them to be too many. You don't have too many cooks. You have too many cooks, you're not going to know where that stomachache came from. You understand? You're not going to know what to investigate when you're feeling sick. So too many cooks. A lot of people have too many cooks. They listen to too many people. They have too many shepherds. You need only one shepherd, which is God. You understand? So when you have too many voices, you're going to find it very hard to actually know when God is talking to you. And I remember early on, it's not early on, but maybe about 4 years ago, I had a number of preachers I used to listen to almost religiously. Some of them are Americans. I used to listen to a lot of Rick Warren, Joyce Meyer, and Pastor Joseph Prince. And listening to these people almost religiously helped me a lot to grow spiritually and answered a lot of questions I had about spirituality and stuff. I loved their style of teaching. However, at a point I had to cut back. I mean, I to cut back, so I had to cut away totally. No, I stopped listening to every one of them. Not because their content wasn't good, but then I realized that same nagging feeling I started to have was you need to start talking to me directly. You need to start listening to me directly. You need to cut away all these other voices. So not because they were negative. So the people that are feeding you, I'm not saying they are bad influences, but they are kind of barriers to you getting the real deal. So it was very hard for me because I was like, oh, so what do I do in the mornings when I wake up now? You understand? I need to start my day on a high and listen to something positive, listen to a preacher. But then it was stopping me from actually getting what God wanted me to do personally. And so it was hard. The first few months of just cutting out, listening to external voices, it seemed like my meditation prayer time was boring. It seemed like there was nothing being done. It seemed like there was no exploration. But then something interesting started happening. As I stayed in silence, I realized that a scripture would come to my mind and just begin to unfold itself. And I was like, where did that thought come from? Where did that come from? I've read this thing for so long, and a lot of times there are not scriptures I was even reading, at the time. Just come out like, does the Bible really say? And I'll go to Google and just okay, the Bible does say this. Oh, I remember the scripture, but then a light just comes to it. You understand? By being silent and not listening to all those external voices to usher me into God's presence. In quotes, it was like God just showing up Himself and just explaining some things and relating it to real life. All these things felt like my thoughts, but I knew they were not my thoughts because there was nothing I could put together to to say I'd read this book. No. They were just raw knowledge, and that only came by reducing the dial of external voices. Some of you have too many external voices. You understand? Too many external voices you listen to religiously that you don't know what God is telling you personally anymore. You understand? So it's not like God is not talking. It's just like he's having to talk over too many people. You understand? So that's one of the reasons. Too many external voices. You can't have too many people feeding you. Then you will not know who your master is anymore. I don't let anybody feed my dog apart from me and my wife. You understand? I don't let it. So when I have neighbors start feeding my dogs, I try to tell them, please don't feed the dogs. It's not like I don't trust them, but I don't want to confuse the dogs. I want the dogs to know who owns them. You understand? Who their master is, who they should listen to, me or my wife. You understand? And that's very important, even for you as a human being. You can't eat from too many feeding troughs. You can't. You understand? You need to know who is feeding you, and sometimes you can have dessert from people, but never the main meal. God has a lot to tell you directly. So that's the second reason why people don't hear from God. The third reason why I feel people don't hear from God is people expect the spectacular. So they're like, this how we think about God and how the media has painted God. So an interaction with God, when you watch it on TV, when someone in Hollywood should portray it, it's always spectacular. So and when we read the Bible too, and that's one of the things about when you read the Old Testament Bible, and people's encounters with God were always spectacular. So God would appear in form of an angel, in form of a blazing light, in form of a burning bush, in form of an animal talking. You understand? So all those things were spectacular, sensational things. But then I dare to say that the most sensational thing God had done was not God 1.0, which we read a lot in the Bible, especially the Old Testament. The most spectacular thing is God 2.0, as I like to call it. That is God within you. And people do not see how spectacular that is, for God to be able to talk from your inside through something called the Holy Spirit, which only you can have if you have a relationship with God. So this whole thing we're talking about hearing from God is actually impossible if you don't have a relationship with God. It's impossible. You understand? Actually impossible. It's like a phone working without a SIM in it. It can be a beautiful phone and stuff like that, but you just can't make calls without that SIM in it. So the Holy Spirit is the SIM that allows you to be able to talk to God. The silence, the exclusivity is the network that you need. You understand? But then everybody needs that SIM to start off with. So the spectacular. You must know that the most spectacular thing is God talking from your inside, not God showing up as a blazing light on the outside or like an angel. No. I think we look for spectacular too much, and then we miss out on God talking from within us. So we need to get out of that spectacular Hollywood mindset of how God talks to us, and begin to understand that God is can be, and most times is in that still silent voice, not in that spectacular showing up in the earthquake, in the strong wind, in the fire type kind of thing. That can happen, but most of the time the most spectacular thing is that God can talk to you from the inside. You understand? That's what we should look out for. You understand? That's what's really spectacular. That God, in his awesomeness, in his might, can live on your inside, can talk from your inside, can possess you. You understand? So yeah, a lot of people look for the spectacular, and that's why they say if it's not in the fire, that my mind cannot be God. You understand? That mind of mine, it can't be God. It's too small, but that's how God works. In the smallness of your mind, it decides to use the smallness of your mind as a means of talking to you, rather than using a hurricane or a tornado. You understand? He wants to use your mind. You understand? So that in itself shows God's awesomeness. So stop looking for the spectacular, and trust the fact that God can use a small thing, seemingly small thing, like your mind, you understand, to be a vessel through which He can talk to you. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is why people don't hear from God is the fact that a lot of us are not surrendered. We're not surrendered. So a lot of people say we don't hear from God, and but the truth is that we are not surrendered. We are too ambitious. We already have a fixed, rigid way in of how things should work and what the outcome of things should be. So there's no accommodation for God in the first place. So how do you hear God talking to you, telling you, like He told me, to be a speaker when you are so rigid about being a designer? You understand? Your mind has no space for any conversation or any thought other than your ambition to be what you want to be. You understand? So a lot of us is us getting in our own way, our sense of ambition. I have to be this thing. I have to live in this kind of house. I have to have this kind of job, pay me this kind of salary. So if your mind is, and that's what we call a closed mind. A lot of times an ambitious mind is a closed mind. Although the world today celebrates ambition, I see it as the reason why a lot of people are unhappy. You understand? Because then the mind is closed to anything outside of what the mind wants. And then how do you hear from God? So people say don't hear from God. No, it's not a matter of not hearing from God. It's just a matter of not even willing to listen to God. So in theory, you're like, oh, God is not speaking to me. But in reality, you don't want any other person's voice but your voice. You understand? So in the end, your mind is not open to God, and so you cannot hear from God. You understand? You're too full of yourself and your plans and your ambition, you understand, to even accommodate any form of leading from God. And that's why people say they don't hear from God. So those are the reasons why I feel people don't hear from God. Talk too much, too many people feeding you, expecting the spectacular, and not surrendered. I think there might be a fifth one I would add in there that just coming to my mind, and that is not having the courage. Some people, you do know that God is speaking to you. You know, not that you don't hear from Him. You just don't have the courage. And I experienced that way too many times as a teacher, as a mentor. A lot of people say they don't have clarity, when in reality, what they don't have is courage. A lot of people don't have courage. They have clarity. They just feel they blame their lack of courage on a lack of clarity. It's very hard for a human being to say, I am scared. I'm scared of this path that I know this inner voice is leading me down. So it's easier for me to say I don't understand than to say I'm scared. So when a lot of people come to me asking for clarity, most of the time I find myself telling them to be courageous of what they already know they should do. So for some people, it's not about hearing from God, it's about trusting God. You understand? When they don't trust God, they kind of say, I can't hear you. You understand? But God, God cannot be mocked. I really hope that if you are one person right now, you are clear, but you're not courageous. The first step to courage is to admitting that you're not courageous and just saying, God, give me courage. You understand? That should be your prayer. Not, God, I'm not clear, because that's not true. You understand? Just say, God, give me courage. I'm hearing from you. I know that this is you, not my restless mind. I know this is you. You understand? And when you can say that, God will begin to fill you with courage. But yeah, those are my thoughts on hearing from God, and that has been my experience on how to hear from God. Yeah, if you have any experience you want to share with me, you want to reach out to me, any questions, feel free to reach out to me on WhatsApp. So my WhatsApp number is +234 80232 66249. So +234 80232 66249. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you. All right, have a great day, guys.